Can Trump deport Black American citizens? The answer is no, not lawfully, because we're citizens. But if you ask whether he can unlawfully deport Black Americans, the answer is yes, because the Supreme Court just took away lower court's ability to stop him. And if you don't believe me, let me show you how this became real after the Trump v. CASA birthright citizenship case. So in Trump v. CASA, the Supreme Court ruled that federal judges cannot issue nationwide injunctions or universal injunctions against Trump executive orders except with class action lawsuits. And those can take a while to be certified, those class action lawsuits. That means even if Trump signs an unconstitutional, unlawful, can Trump deport Black American citizens? The answer is no, not lawfully. Full executive order, judges can only protect the people who are named in the lawsuit or members of the certified class action lawsuit. Everyone else, they're vulnerable. Even if what Trump does is blatantly unconstitutional or illegal. So, can Trump deport Black American citizens? Lawfully? No. But that's not the question anymore, because he doesn't need to act lawfully if there are no judges that can stop him. Gates, close quote. She said no right, that means no citizenship right, no civil right, no voting rights, etc. Folks, that's not theory. That's not me pontificating. That's the reality that we're living in now. Additionally, back in March, Trump told El Salvador's president he would be deporting homegrown criminals. He didn't say immigrants. He said homegrown. That means people born in the United States. So if he targets Black Americans as criminals or gangbangers or threats or enemies, etc., what's stopping him from issuing an executive order to detain or to deport those people? Nothing. That puts Black Americans and any other targeted group in danger. But remember, stay woke. But remember, stay woke. But remember.
Oh, good morning. Good morning, Let It Be Known family, and I hope you are woke. I am Niele Anderson, your co-host. Stacy is out today, and we want to welcome you to Let It Be Known. This is the place where we uplift the stories and tell you the stories that are impacting Black America. We have a full show for you today. Dion Robigan joins us to discuss the role of Black journalists to tell these important stories. And California State Senator Lola Smallwood Cuevas is here to talk about how she's protecting Black landmarks. You saw that video. Good morning, Stephanie Humphreys. We got Warren G in the house. Mr. MB is here. Mike V is here. Grand Rising to you as well. You heard the brother say it. This is going to impact us as well. And I'm talking about the immigration reform catastrophe that the Trump Klan administration is doing. And of course, Donald Trump yesterday pulled up to Florida to visit the controversial immigration detention center in Florida, in the Florida Everglades, that they're dubbing Alligator Alcatraz. And it's home of pythons, mosquitoes, alligators. Horrible place to put a detention center. It's not even on stable ground, y'all. Now, the facility was set up roughly in about a week, by Governor Ron DeSantis, and it's expected to house over 5,000 undocumented immigrants. Now, the facility is estimated to cost $450 million annually. And we haven't really determined if that money will go to privatized prisons. And it has been approved by the Department of Homeland Security. So they've already allocated the budget for this facility. And news broke yesterday after Trump left that it was already flooding because it was raining. So it's not on stable ground. It's hurricane season. We don't even know if that place has air conditioning. And so we definitely have to pay attention to how they're setting this up. One person even posted that they put a screenshot of what's happening in Florida and a Germany concentration camp, and you couldn't tell one from the other. And currently, there are about 56,000 detained immigrants in federal custody as of mid-June. And this is according to Syracuse University researchers. So as you can see, this is something that we are going to have to, as the people, pay attention to, because like the brother said, it is going to impact Black people too. The federal courts have already made it to where Donald Trump can start picking up anybody that he wants to. Okay. And Trump also just gave Homeland Security, immigrant ICE agents, authority to be judges at this detention center. So it doesn't even have to go through courts anymore. Homeland Security can deputize their ICE agents as judges, and they can determine who gets deported and who's not. And on top of that, Donald Trump also said yesterday that we can be deported. Okay. Just American citizen criminals. Okay. American citizen criminals can be deported as well. Yes, MB, 50,000 detainees since June. Yes, Stephanie Humphreys, 450 million could support feeding families. Okay. That's what they took out from us in that big ugly bill that they brought and they passed in the Senate yesterday that now goes to the House. And we can jump into that story right now. Vice President J.D. Vance, of course, gave the tie-breaking vote as Senate Republicans passed Trump's big ugly bill. Now, it should be noted that GOP senators Tom Tillis, Rand Paul, and Susan Collins voted against the measure, along with, of course, every Democrat. So that means that, our Black guy, well, he's not our Black guy, but he is a Black guy, Tim Scott, he voted to pass this big ugly bill too. But California Congress member Cindy Kamlager joined State of the People Marathon, which we brought to you yesterday morning. The State of the People Marathon is still going right now. But hear what she had to say about healthcare for everyone and how this is going to impact everyone. Take a look. We're going to get that volume going for you shortly.
I tell people, if it was so good, it would have been in writing a long time ago. You know what I mean? Like when you're trying to marry somebody and they rolling up with this prenup that you haven't had a chance to read, you know what I mean? When you're trying to buy a car or something and you can't afford it and they slip you the paperwork with the fine print, those are examples of when you should take a pause, right? And we are in one of those moments where we need to take a pause so we can tell the American people all that is in this trifling bill. And that's why we're rushing back so that we can explain to folks what is in it. Now, I don't know about you, but I have never heard of a winning argument that starts with, I'm going to give you less health care. I'm going to make your healthcare costs go up. I'm going to shut down your community clinics and your hospitals. I'm going to make sure that you have fewer doctors that are able to provide care for you. But that is what they're selling. I have never heard a winning argument that says, I'm going to make it harder for you to get a school scholarship. I'm going to take away opportunities for Pell Grants. I'm going to make it harder for you to defer payment. People are going to wake up broke, sick, hungry, and poor because of this bill. I tell people,
I think we lost her audio. But she went on to talk about how it's not Medicaid being taken away from individuals. It's not just going to impact those individuals, but it's going to impact people with healthcare. Your premiums are going to go up because hospitals are not going to turn those individuals away. Right? They still have to service them, but it's just going to impact those of us who have health care. Our premiums are going to go up. So it's a trigger effect. Some of the other things that this ugly bill will do is it will take away health care from 16 million Americans. Billionaires, of course, are going to get massive tax breaks, more than 3.5 trillion added to the national debt. There's going to be cuts to food support for veterans. New student loan borrowers pay more. 186 billion in cuts to SNAP food assistance, increase in gas prices, and the list goes on and on, guys. It goes on and on. Yes, continue to read through it, Stephanie Humphrey channels, because knowledge is power. Yeah, co-payments are going to skyrocket. And Dr. Joni says, I have been just crushed and furious since the sentence move yesterday. So yes, this is going to impact so many people. That was Sydney Kamlager. She's actually my Congress member. And so, of course, this is going to go back to her house, which is the House of Representatives. And now they're scrambling to try to figure out how to get this bill passed, how to get it done. And so we will continue to pay attention to this. And the bill heads back to the House, as I said, and Trump wants this done by the 4th of July, which is Friday. Okay, so of course you have organizations like the NAACP, the Urban League, the National Council of Negro Women, and of course you have the State of the People urging everybody to call the Capitol switchboard. That number is 202-224-3121. That's 202-224-3121. Call the switchboard, ask to speak to your Congress member, and then go a little extra and ask to speak to a Republican lawmaker as well. Flood the phones, guys. This is what we have to do. This is the little bit of power that we do have. It's not a lot, but it's enough to keep us busy and keep us active. I see Stephanie Humphreys has said students have to have 15 credits instead of 12 to get a Pell Grant. And it will not only impact SNAP benefits, but students who receive free lunch. Yeah, I'm so glad, Stephanie, that you are reading it. Break it down. You guys pay attention to the chat. She's telling you a lot of other things in detail that will happen as this bill continually moves towards Donald Trump's desk. Everything is a ripple effect. That's right, Nancy Walls. Everything is a ripple effect. A lot of news broke yesterday. And one of the big things was jurors in the Diddy trial have reached a verdict. Yep, they have. 4 out of 5 charges they have had a verdict on, and they're split on the racketeering. So the jury is said to have unpersuadable views on the racketeering charge. So they're at an impasse. They cannot move forward. But the judge said that they have to come back to court today. They need to deliberate more on that racketeering. And court starts at 9 a.m. In New York City. But just to recap, the charges are the racketeering conspiracy, which the jury cannot come to a conclusion on, but they have come to a conclusion on the sex trafficking by force and fraud and transportation to engage in prostitution. So those are the 4 counts that they have come to a verdict on, and we'll see what happens today. They said that the judge could possibly bypass the racketeering, which gives the prosecution another try at trying Diddy on the racketeering and have the jurors just give the verdicts on the other 4 counts, or he can push them to come to a conclusion on the racketeering. And the prosecution, as well as Diddy's attorneys, are in alignment with the judge. They want the jurors to go back and deliberate more and come to a conclusion. So we may have a verdict today. I see you guys are still going at it about this bill on Capitol Hill. And of course we should be. It is going to decimate our communities of color. And it's going to make it harder for the middle class. Okay, so the poor is going to get poorer, and the middle class is going to drop into a swamp, just like they built that detention center. But like we have on the screen, don't be silent. U.S. Capitol Switchboard 202-224-3121. That's why the Black Press is so important, because the Black Press isn't just about news and views, but it's also about advocacy. And so we definitely want to not only bring you the news, but we want to show you how you can be a part of solving the problem, as we have Black folks in this country for years. And I want to bring in our next guest. So basically, the National Association of Black Journalists is preparing to celebrate 50 years of bringing the news from the Black perspective. And of course, the organization stands as a powerful testament to the legacy of its founders and the resilience of generations of Black journalists who followed in their footsteps. So joining us now is Dion Rubigoen. He's a journalist and editor of digital and business for the LA Wave, and he is running for president of NABJ. Welcome, Dion.
What's going on, Niele? How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So wait, one quick thing I wanted to say. My last name is Rabowen. You're going with Rabowen. Easy way to remember it.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. You're going with Rabowen. And
right.
Dion Rabowen and I were just at the NMPA BlackPressUSA conference in Savannah, Georgia, where we met. He is working with publishers that are members of BlackPressUSA, and he told us that he's running for president of NABJ. So talk to us, Dion, why you decided to run for president.
Well, first of all, I think you touched on something right there, right? The Black Press and NABJ have been very separate. We've been kind of off on our own, doing our own thing, and that needs to stop. NABJ needs to come together with the Black Press. We need to get together with HBCUs and really start recruiting and working with our young people. Right now, NABJ just isn't living up to the commitments of its mandate, right? NABJ is supposed to stand up for Black journalists, supposed to represent for Black journalists, provide opportunities for Black journalists. And NABJ hasn't been doing those things. And that's why I'm running. It's time to take the organization in a different direction. And in particular, that means doing more with the Black Press, doing more with HBCUs, but it also means providing more programming for NABJ members. It also means standing up and being strong when these companies are mistreating Black journalists, right? When we're seeing these layoffs where Black folks are the last ones in and the first ones out, we need to step up and do something, provide consequences, and make sure that they know that that's unacceptable. Making sure that Black journalists have opportunities. And rather than just talking about, oh, it would be nice if we did these things, I'm actually going to put in place teams that are going to step forward and demand accountability with civil rights leaders, with lawyers, with labor union organizers, who are going to make sure that when NABJ speaks, that we have action behind us. They say speak softly and carry a big stick, right? That's what NABJ is going to be about under my presidency.
And so we talk about narratives, and we look at the news and see how information is given to us. And a lot of times it's given to us from a narrative of, let's just be real, white men in high places. And so talk to us about the difference between a Black narrative and a mainstream narrative.
Well, I've worked on both sides of the media, right? I've worked in these large corporate newsrooms, worked at places like the Wall Street Journal, Reuters, Yahoo Finance as a financial journalist. And I've also worked, with the Black Press, as you said. Right now I'm working with the LA Wave. I've worked with the Atlanta Daily World and others, the Atlanta Voice. So when you talk about that Black narrative, we've seen that Black newspapers and the Black press center issues like race, like voting access, like healthcare, as you're talking about this morning, right? All the outcomes that could come from this quote unquote big, beautiful bill that Republicans on Capitol Hill passed over the weekend. So it really is about understanding who is centered. And I remember when I was at the Wall Street Journal, I had trouble getting articles published because it wasn't centered on that white narrative, right? Because folks weren't talking about it, because my stories were centering Black people, centering Black issues, talking about capital and Black communities. And I wasn't able to get those stories published just because there was so much resistance, because my story didn't come from that traditional perspective that you're talking about.
Right, right. And so last year at the NABJ conference, there was a lot of controversy because Donald Trump showed up. A lot of members felt that he shouldn't be there. Some felt that he should. And when he did arrive, there was a blur of the truth as to what happened. A lot of people were mad at the current president of NABJ for inviting him, or from the people that he chose to ask the questions. If you were president, how would you have handled that situation?
Well, listen, NABJ has a long history of inviting presidential candidates to speak to our members. And I do think as journalists, we need to have these people in front of us. We need to put the questions to them and demand answers. What happened in this case, and why I think I was disappointed by it and a lot of others was the process. The current president, Ken Lemon, invited Donald Trump under the cover of darkness. He didn't tell members ahead of time. He didn't take the opportunity to talk to our members, who are the leaders of the White House Correspondents Association, who are leaders of organizations that interview the president, like Yamiche Alcindor, who have been disrespected and berated and disrespected by the president. He didn't allow those folks to weigh in with opportunity, or to weigh in and say, well, here's why I don't think you should invite him. He didn't open the opportunity for discourse about this. And so NABJ members were blindsided because the president and the executive director basically brought President Trump to the convention without telling anybody, without getting any input or feedback. That was the problem. Under NABJ and my leadership, everything's going to be transparent, from big names that we're bringing to the convention, to where we're going to locate the convention cities, to everything else about the organization. The NABJ has tried to operate in the shadows and try to keep everything from being known, to try to keep information away from members. That's not how you run an organization. If this organization is all about members, then we need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure members are informed, to make sure members are empowered, and to make sure that we're being leaders for everybody. My whole campaign is about leadership for everybody. And so again, I don't think there was a problem with having Trump at the convention. There's a long history of that, even when Republicans have been disliked largely by the Black community. But I think we've got to have some guardrails in place. One of the things that you talk about, the people who were presenting or interviewing him, for every other panel at NABJ for the convention, they said everyone who's on the panel has to be an NABJ member. You can't moderate a panel if you're not an NABJ member. But then he brought Harris Faulkner, who's not an NABJ member, who has never interfaced with the organization, to be a person asking questions on the panel. So that upset a lot of people, because you're breaking your own rules. You're doing things on this panel that you said other folks couldn't do on their own panel. So there was just a lot of talking out of both sides of your mouth, a lot of, hiding rather than opening up the truth. And again, that's what we've got to do. We've got to be consistent. We've got to be respectful. We've got to make sure that folks are given opportunities. And if we as Black journalists aren't doing that for other Black journalists, who will?
Right. Some people, Dr. Joni is saying, I'm surprised Trump even allows this organization to exist. And B is saying,
Yeah.
that was an insane interview. Wow. Rump showed his true colors once again. And Nancy Wall is saying, as a Black man, he probably won't come. Dion sounds like he would handle him like he needs to. So this morning, since we're talking about media, this morning it comes out that Paramount agrees to pay $16 million to settle Trump's $60 million lawsuit. Right now in media, it's hard to be a truth teller because Donald Trump is controlling mainstream media. If you were elected president, how would you support Black journalists of showing up, number one, to get jobs in these mainstream media organizations, but also to be unapologetic truth tellers? How are you going to navigate if president of NABJ in a Trump administration?
Well, listen, what you spoke about hit the nail on the head when you're talking about Trump really restricting NABJ and the potential for this organization to face some real trouble under his administration. That's absolutely true. We are in a moment that demands a response, and NABJ has been all about sending statements with no teeth and having meetings with corporate leaders where, folks are kind of keying and having a good time, but there's no accountability, there's no demands faced, there's no action taken. Right. So all that ends with my presidency. We are going to put together a rapid response team, like I said, of lawyers, of civil rights organizers, of labor union organizers, who are going to really put fire to some of these companies when they're saying, oh, we don't need to worry about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so that means we get rid of this whole race coverage department over here. We lay off these reporters over there. We're going to eliminate our hiring mandates and other things that are bringing Black journalists and people of color into our newsroom. We're going to say, well, listen, not only are we going to release a statement to let everybody know what you're doing, we're going to organize social media campaigns. We might be outside your building picketing. Right? We're going to work with these labor organizers and these civil rights organizations to really step forward and put fire to you and to make sure that you feel the heat the same way you would when you disrespect labor unions, the same way you would when you're disrespecting Black people as a whole. We're going to get together with these organizations to make sure that Black journalists feel protected and that there is accountability. And so again, it's not just about statements. It's not just about saying we need to step forward and do these things. I have a plan to actually make sure that media companies feel the heat when they disrespect Black journalists. The other side of that question is, what are you going to do to help folks get these jobs, right? And that comes from training people for the next generation of journalism. So we're going to bring in tech companies like Microsoft, like Canva, like Nota, like all these other tech companies.
Let me just say this. Let me ask this question,
Sure.
because you're bringing up all of these companies, and a lot of these companies have gotten rid of their DEI, which is code word for get rid of the people of color, primarily Black folks. You're naming all of these companies, but how are you going to navigate with this new DEI policy and, trying to shadow ban us?
Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hire a chief technology officer, a CTO, someone who is connected to who is connected to these tech companies and who knows the folks on their boards who are making the spending decisions. NABJ is an organization that has more than 4,500 members. And my plan, as part of what we're going to do with lowering costs for the convention, with recruiting more HBCUs, and with going out and improving our relationship with the Black press, we're going to increase our membership numbers. So we're going to have 5,000, 6,000 folks. And we're going to say, listen, we are one of the largest, if not the largest, media organization in the US. We have 4,500 members. We have 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 members. You need to be here. If you're releasing a product that helps journalists out, well, there's nowhere where you're going to be able to find more journalists than here. We've got young journalists, we've got mid-career journalists, we've got older journalists, and we're going to be giving you opportunities to provide them programming, to put your products in front of them, and to create relationships with these folks that are unlike anything you're going to get anywhere else. So we are going to have a presentation, and we're going to have connections to make sure that these folks know, listen, you need to be here. And if you're not here, well, then maybe our rapid response teams need to come see you as well. Again, that's what it's all about. Power concedes nothing without a demand, right? And without enforceable, actionable consequences that we are going to demonstrate. So we are going to make sure that if folks aren't giving Black journalists a chance, if folks aren't giving NABJ a chance, that we are there to enforce consequences for racist actions. We are going to be sticking up and defending Black folks in a real way, and in a way that NABJ hasn't in quite some time under my administration.
There's a lot of things happening to individuals that resist this Trump Klan administration. I'm talking about from elected officials to even journalists. And in 2003, you were racially profiled while working at the Wall Street Journal. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and how you would deal with situations like that if you were president?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. In 2023, it was actually in 2022 that it happened. I was outside of a Chase Bank, just conducting interviews, doing, the man on the street. Hey, what do you think about this? Tell me about, the story was actually about savings accounts and why
Mm-hmm.
folks were keeping their money in savings accounts at places like Chase Bank that don't offer really any kind of yield, right? Some of these bank accounts
Mm-hmm.
at that point were paying 5% interest. You were getting 0.01% interest on your
Mm-hmm.
Chase savings account. And so, I'm out there just talking to people. Hey, what's going on with your savings account? And the bank called the police on me. The
Mm-hmm.
police showed up, and after about 10 seconds of conversation, I was put in cuffs and kind of put in the back of a police car. So when that happened, the president of NABJ did call me. We didn't get a chance to talk, but again, this is about enforcing consequences, making sure that people know that our members are protected. And so, again, I've taken some action on my own with regard to
Mm-hmm.
this, but I haven't had NABJ at my back. NABJ hasn't had the resources to go forward and actually take any action on my part. And that's not because they haven't had the money. NABJ is actually sitting on $8 million in assets and has more than $2 million sitting in a bank account, earning no interest. So it's not like the money's not there. The money just isn't being spent on members. The money isn't being used to
Mm.
grow the organization and to invest in the kinds of things that NABJ needs to be doing, right? Like this rapid response team to protect all journalists. Not only that, I'm not only going to create this rapid response team, we're going to put money into local chapters, create a $250,000 fund called NABJ Ventures to help grow our local chapters. We're also going to invest in our convention budget to make sure our panels are good and providing journalists with those skills they need for the next generation, bring in new sponsors. And again, our job fair, which is well known, has been shrinking for years. We're going to start growing that thing. So this is what it's all about as NABJ presidents, just making sure the organization is there to back Black journalists on the front end to make sure they have the skills and the career opportunities they need, but also to protect them when those career opportunities are threatened.
Okay, so when is the election?
So voting opens up July 14th for all registered for all official NABJ members who have been members since June 1st or who've had their membership renewed since June 1st. You can go online, nabj.org, and you can vote. And voting ends on August 8th. So from July 14th to August 8th, you can get your votes in. If you're not going to the NABJ convention in Cleveland this year, if you are going, you can vote on site at NABJ. But why take chances? If you heard some things you like, if you want to go, if you're going with Rabowen, you can vote as soon as July 14th online at nabj.org. And also you can check out my website, Dion for NABJ Prez. That's Dion for the number 4, NABJPREZ.com. And we're going to have a link up there to help you vote as well.
All right, this is Dion Rabowen. He's running for president of NABJ, but you can also check him out at the LA Wave. He writes, like he said, for LA Sentinel and Atlanta Voices, and he is a part of NNPA, Black Press USA. All the luck, Dion, and thank you for waking up this morning to join us.
Hey, thank you for having me, Niele.
For sure, for sure. All right. So across the country, efforts to recognize and preserve Black cultural contributions, they're under attack. From federal agencies to local school boards, attempts to erase Black history are increasing. These developments not only endanger historical American truth, but threaten the civic identity of entire communities across this country. So, California Senator Lola Smallwood Cuevas is responding, and she's here to tell us how. Let it be known, family, welcome Senator Lola Smallwood Cuevas. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much.
Thanks for getting up this morning to join us. We know there's a lot happening here in the great state of California, and so we're glad to have you. Did we lose you? I think we may have lost the senator for a moment. But we'll talk about why this conversation is so important as we get her back. From a national context, we can talk about the bust of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., how it's been removed from the White House. without public explanation. We could talk about the Smithsonian, who was ordered to strip certain pieces and reduce DEI programming, directly impacting exhibits at the African American Museum. Juneteenth was publicly downplayed by white folks, but we know us Black folks celebrated with pride, and we were quite surprised that Trump didn't say anything about it. And the NAACP's advocacy efforts were dismissed, while the Freedom to Learn campaign became a target for federal criticism. So, Senator Smallwood, I'm just giving our viewers a national context as to why it's so important. This cultural display of preserving Black history you're doing here in Los Angeles. So talk about the district that you represent here in California. Let's start with that.
Absolutely. And again, I appreciate being here with you. I represent the dynamic 28th district, which for folks who don't know, it represents the richness of South Central Los Angeles. To the south, to the west, Culver City, where we have Sony Studios, Amazon and TikTok, and to the east, LA Live, which is California's Times Square. So it is a very dynamic and rich district. It represents all of the best of California.
Okay, and so you're actually my state senator.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and I live in the Leimert Park area. Talk to us about what you're trying to do here in South LA to preserve Black culture.
Well, as you mentioned, we're in a time where culture is being attacked, where people of color are being abused and their rights threatened, where the education system is being forced to purge the stories and the real history of people. And so my district, we have what is, I say, one of the largest cradles of Black culture in the nation. We have over 7,000 Black-owned businesses. We have over 4,000 cultural assets between restaurants, churches, museums, theaters. We even have a Black arts colony in our district. And Leimert Park is a crown jewel. It is an African village in the heart of Los Angeles. Los Angeles still has one of the 10th largest Black populations in the nation. Because our topography is so spread out, you don't see that. But it is South Central that holds all of these cultural assets, big and small. And so we know how important it is in this moment for us to preserve this history, to lift up this history, to share this culture and experience with everyone, not just in the nation, but is in the world, particularly as we are expecting to host the 2028 Olympic Games. We will be hosting next year the World Cup. We host the Super Bowl at SoFi Stadium at our neighbors in Inglewood, and all the All-Star games. And so as the world is coming to our backyard, we want to make sure that they get a taste of Black culture and Black history. No one does it better, from Soul Train to Nipsey Hussle. This is the community we love, and we know the rest of the world will share. And I want to say now more than ever, we want the world to consume this culture and history, because we will need them in the fight over these next few years to protect what our communities have cultivated for so long. So establishing South Central Los Angeles, 2.5 square miles of cultural asset, Black cultural asset, is incredibly important. This would be the first Black historic cultural district in California, and the only one after years of establishing 14 cultural districts across this fine state. It's one of the reasons why I fought so hard for this, because there's no way we can have 14 cultural districts and not have a Black cultural district, and certainly have South LA be one of them.
I didn't know that. David Youngblood is saying, wasn't Biddy Mason prominent in this district? Yes, she was.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She is the mother of this district. She is the mother of California, really. One of the mothers of California and Los Angeles, but she certainly is the mother of South Central Los Angeles, establishing FAME, the oldest African-American church in our city.
Yeah, for sure. And you did a study, I saw on to gather data to understand the direction to go in with this cultural activation that you're doing. Can you touch briefly on what the study revealed to your office?
Well, what the study revealed is that we have all kinds of diversity in our cultural assets. We have the first large state-funded African American museum in the CAM, the California African American Museum. We also have the Lula Washington and Debbie Allen Dance Theaters. We are home to the Barbara Morrison Blues and Jazz Museum. We have the John Singleton film studios and production offices. We have Issa Rae's supper club and many of her, and coffee shops and many of her film backdrops. We have the Black Beverly Hills, which has the largest inventory of large mansions that were home to some of our most revered Black stars. When Hollywood segregated our communities and refused to allow our celebrities to move into Hollywood, we have the Dunbar Hotel, which was our Apollo, which was the anchor and epicenter of Black culture during the covenants, during segregation, which existed. Remember, LA is the South, and we experienced many of the same repressions and oppressions that existed, and segregation was one of those, including occupational segregation. And so that's why we have so many Black-owned businesses. That's why we have so many Black-owned restaurants, so many Black-owned service organizations, and really a thriving community. And I want to say much of California has experienced significant gentrification. When we think of places like Oakland, we think of places like San Francisco, where much of the Black cultural assets have been disappeared. We want to maintain and protect these assets and our neighbors and communities. And so this is also about building an economic development strategy where we can invite people to have a Blackcation, I like to say, a Black experience.
I love that,
Blackcation.
Blackcation.
And if they want to have, their people, millions of people, over 60 million folks come to California every year. Certainly we know many of them will want to come and experience a Blackcation. Our communities spend the majority of our funds when we as Black residents and citizens of this country travel. We want to have that experience.
Right.
And so we want to invite the world to do this. And what the report says is that we are absolutely ready and prepared and able to be that asset, not just for our local residents, but for the world.
So you brought up Dunbar, the Dunbar Hotel, which is on the historic Central Avenue. My grandmother actually lived on 54th and Central back in the 50s. And so her brother, I took him over to Central Avenue a couple of years ago, and his heart was almost broken because he didn't see that thriving Black LA that he knew. He was like, I used to go to the Dunbar and see Coltrane, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Or Duke Ellington. And so he thought about that. But from Central Avenue coming back to Leimert Park, we know that right next to Leimert Park, Councilman Marquise Harris Dawkins is working on the Destination Crenshaw, which was the vision of Nipsey Hussle. And so you're looking to develop Leimert Park, which is right next to it. And we're talking about Central Avenue. How important do you think that will be to help further the importance of recycling Black dollars?
Incredibly important. First of all, it's ours. We built and cultivated this vast district, and all of those assets you named are inside of this cultural district. And it spans from La Brea to Central, as I mentioned, from the 10 freeway where we have the Underground Museum and Debbie Allen Studios, down through Leimert Park where we have Destination Crenshaw and so many other incredible assets, down to Manchester, which is the border of Inglewood. And so this is incredibly important because there's already a tremendous amount of Black commerce and recycling of dollars that is happening. But what we want to do is make this a destination for dollars to come into this district so that we can enhance the recycling of those dollars, the preservation of those assets, the expansion and strengthening of our Black-owned businesses. I had the opportunity to visit Alabama, where I got to see Bryan Stevenson's work, where with the Legacy Museum and with the Anti-Lynching Museum. Phenomenal commerce, and certainly because of the history so painful, many of us didn't want to travel back to Montgomery. We didn't want to travel back to Alabama, knowing that experience and also knowing how conservative those places continue to be. But Bryan Stevenson gave us a reason to come. He gave us a reason to spend our dollars. He gave us a reason to come and understand deeply that history from a Black perspective. And that's what we want to do here. We want to create our reasons to bring the world to hear our authentic stories. And the story you told is remarkable, right? Because so many, and part of the report tells a lot of these stories because they are embedded throughout our history. So we're working with a number of organizations and large corporations to help us really think about how do we preserve essentially what is our story. So we're talking with Airbnb about the experiences that we could have in South LA. And those many Airbnb bread and breakfast owners in our district who are providing beautiful lodging in the experience of a Black experience and in the culture of Black hospitality. We're also working, with Apple to bring them on to help us be able to mark these amazing trail of history, festival of histories. We want to mark those so that people can use their devices to understand and meander through this history. So it's about being able to mark this space. I also invested, in addition to us winning in this very difficult budget that you laid out, and I would love to talk more about what's happening with our budget, but we were able to have the legislature really support our effort to preserve this history now by giving $2.5 million to seed this cultural district, because they know it's a crown jewel for the state. Very grateful to my colleagues for supporting that initiative. And then before, when I first came into office, in 2022, the first thing I did was to set aside $3 million to be able to ensure that we could invest in building the markers, right? As you enter Chinatown, as you enter Little Filipino Town, you see these markers all over the community to say, this is here. Well, we want markers to say that our community is here, that the Black community, the Black cultural district of Los Angeles is here, and to mark that area. So this has been a statewide affair. I want to give a shout out to Council Member President Marquise Harris Dawson for his support, to Curran Price and Heather Hutt, whose city council districts sit within my state Senate district, and all of their city council districts make up this incredible Black historic area. I also want to thank my partner in good trouble, my assembly member, Sharday Alawari, who is also working with us. She just came to the legislature.
And one of the youngest. She's one of the youngest too.
One of the youngest, one of the dynamic, I say one of the squad. Who is here. And I sit on the Senate Committee on the Olympics. Another good colleague, Assemblymember Tina McKinnon chairs in the Assembly, the Committee on the Olympics. And so our intention is to ensure that our communities fully participate in these opportunities as these large scale events, sporting events come to our area. We also want to ensure that there is something left behind when the games are over. This historic cultural district will be what will be left behind.
We're running short on time, but I have a couple more questions to get in. This sounds amazing, but as we look at things from a federal level, we look at the Trump administration. I call it the Trump Klan administration. That they're pushing through this big, ugly bill. We know that funding for organizations that they like to term DEI, which we know as Black folks, the funding is being pulled. Do you anticipate or see any problems with funding for this cultural experience in LA based upon what's happening on a federal level?
Absolutely. And again, California has a lot of work to do to protect itself from Trump. Our state is in the crosshairs of this administration, make no doubt about it. Our very strong leaders who are rooted in community, like our mayor, from our city to our state government, are under attack by this president. It really is attack on our values and our people. And so certainly our budget is also under attack. This big, we call it the big BS bill, is threatening to cut 20 million people off of their health care, expected to cost California about $20 billion. And I want to say that's as the city of LA is incurring the cost of about 237 million because of these occupying troops and all the costs that their disruption and lawlessness is costing our cities. So we know that this budget is going to steal important health care from our seniors, from our vulnerable communities. It's going to strip our higher education grants. One of the things that Californians have long invested in is a very strong and robust education system, K through 12 to higher ed. This is going to really restrict our Pell Grant, so our poorest, most vulnerable students of color cannot access higher education. At the same time, it is dismantling all of our climate resilient efforts. For the first time, California's passed a climate bond here in the state that would invest over $70 million into our Black urban cultural conservancies, our park poor areas. And now we have the federal government coming behind and gutting so much of the natural resources. Now those dollars are being threatened because we have to cover the basics. Look, 2/3 of California's healthcare budget is funded by the federal government. Through our Medicaid funds our Medi-Cal system. And because of the size of our state, we have 11 million residents just in Los Angeles, the size of Portugal, the country. So when the federal government cuts its budget, it sends so many reverberations through our state and local economies. We just struggled to balance our budget, and it was a struggle because we had a $12 billion shortfall. Now this big BS budget presents another 20 million people hurt and an estimated $20 billion shortfall whole blown in the California's recently balanced budget. So we're going to have to come back and fight. But one thing that we cannot do, Niele, and I want to make this very clear, we cannot do Trump's work for him. We cannot allow these cuts to force us to turn our backs on diversity and inclusion programs, our Black and brown communities. We cannot let Trump force us to rob our undocumented families of health care and to detain them. We cannot let Trump force us to close abortion clinics. We cannot let Trump force us to turn our back on clean water and clean air. And I want to say, California now is a people of color majority. And part of this whole formula is to destabilize a people of color majority so that we can't have the things that other communities had without question. Things like housing, things like clear air and water, things like constitutional rights and freedoms, things like access to education. So this budget is about values. It's about fighting this BS. It's about California understanding that we may have to do the hard job of raising revenues to make sure that our state is protected and that our residents are protected. The last thing we can afford to do is to turn our backs on each other. And we're a nation state. We're the 4th largest economy in the world. We're bigger than Germany. And so we have the ability and the resources to continue to be the resist state, to lead this nation in fighting Trump. And we absolutely must ensure we have the resources and the capacity to continue to do so. And I want to say one last thing.
Okay, one last thing.
We're about 300 days from the primaries. Make no mistake, things are going to get more chaotic because out of all of this, the main thing is they don't want us to vote. But they are not like us. We will keep our eye on the prize, and come next July, next June, and next November, we will take one of our levels back of Congress. We will take Congress, we will take Senate back in the midterms, and we will begin to put California and the nation back on track to the country and the state that we all deserve and to call our own.
Right, and we hope that there is an election. As we see what happened in Miami, they pushed the election back, so the mayor gets to stay in for another year. And if we pay attention to the patterns of the Republican Party, and we could just use as an example of the history, it started with the concept of bogus critical race theory. Republicans ran to be put on, local Republicans ran to be put on school boards. It swelled, and now we're fighting for Black history. So we have to pay attention to that. Which brings me to the importance of having conversations like this, because sometimes we get so boggled down with that Trump clan machine and what they're pushing at us, we don't get to see what local and state electeds that look like us are doing. And so we can fight the Trump clan, but we also can maintain our communities. And I think what you're doing with this cultural activation in South LA is an example of that, that you can fight the Trump clan, but you can also stay focused on making our communities better and preserving our culture. Before I let you go, I have to ask, one of the biggest conversations that we have been having on Let It Be Known is centered around reparations, which is another conversation within our community that we can't lose sight on just because the Trump clan is doing what they're doing. We know that Black people can always walk and chew gum at the same time. California is leading the conversation in reparations, and the nation is looking at us. We know Ayanna Pressley introduced HR 40. And so as a legislator and as one of the agents that are moving reparations forward in the state of California, can you give us any update on what's happening with the bills that were presented last week and how the California Black legislators are moving reparations forward?
Well, we continue to fight for reparations, and we're doing it strategically. This is one of those budgets where we're not going to win the full breadth of reparations. And so what we are moving are those systemic changes around data collection in our state and making sure that our state hiring is tracking Black and other people of color to ensure that we're getting into those supervisorial and managerial positions. That bill was the bill that I carried. That bill has moved forward. We're working through right now a very important bill that is being carried by Akilah Weber. And this is to establish what is eligibility process for reparations in California will be. This is an important bill where we wanted to be very clear that we did not want that process to be determined by a governor or by bureaucrats. We wanted to ensure that our community had full control over that process, experts, people with that expertise in genealogy and that tracking, so that we can have a system that works for everyone to ensure that they could be eligible to receive whatever reparations are available to the state. That bill has passed both houses. We expect that that bill will be funded. We see those resources in our budget. So that means that our local CSU, which is essentially, we have several that are in the Black community that will be responsible for helping us to define, using their academic expertise to define what our eligibility process will be. Once that process is established, then the caucus will then take that and codify that process as part of the full-on eligibility process for reparations. So we are making incredible progress. There are 11 other bills beyond the two that I just lifted up that are moving forward, that has to do with ensuring that we have access to eminent domain for our stolen land. We have another bill that is working through to ensure that the descendants of slave lineage is a class that can be defined through statute in the state of California, where unfortunately we have been in an anti-affirmative action state far before the federal government under Prop 209. And so we want to make sure that we're not looking at race, but we're looking at lineages, right? So just as immigrants are vulnerable communities, descendants of slaves are also very vulnerable communities, and we want to make sure that that status is recognized. So there are very important bills that are moving that pave the way for our, what we call our road to repair. We have to pave that road with good policies so that when we come to the major important individual reparations and large scale financial reparations, we want to make sure that the road is paved for us to be successful. And that includes with these policies that we're passing now, while our budget is in being challenged, obviously, by the federal implications, but also financial restrictions this time around. But we know our financial picture will brighten, and that's when we know we will be prepared and ready to win the reparations that the state of California has already committed to supporting. It's just a matter of us moving through the legislative process to put it in statute. We are doing it, and we're doing strategically, and we're doing it together and unified as the legislative Black Caucus of California. I want to say that we appreciate all of the community work. We had several lobby days this year where hundreds of Black community members through the Black Power Network, through Black Women for Wellness, through Black Worker Center, Black Lives Matter, came and really stood up to support our efforts to pass these important policies and to make sure we build the coalition necessary to win. We have 300 plus recommendations out of the reparations task force. The report that came to the legislature was 1,100 pages. We are working our way through that to build a policy roadmap and to ensure that we win, and we win fully the expectations of reparations in California. So stay tuned for more on our Road to Repair initiative. I look forward to sharing more updates with you.
Oh, we would love that.
It is an exciting time. And that's what movement work is all about. We can fight, but we can also have victories along the way that help us ensure that we win the war in the long term. And that's really
and I think that
what this is about.
I think that's important to why it was important to have these conversations, because we get so boggled down with this Trump Klan administration and everything that they're throwing at us. But to have a conversation with you and look at what's happening on a state and local level, that's where us as a Black community are going to win, to keep our eyes on the prize as to how to continue to do this Black experience in America. And thank goodness to you, you're making the 92% proud, Senator Lola, because you are, because this is what we need. We need to hear what else is going on in the country that's positive, that's refreshing, that, like, for me as a California, I can get involved because I just don't have to show up to protest. There are other things that I can do. I can help move policy. I can help move agenda forward on the local and state level. So we would love to have you back to continue this conversation and the road to advancing Black culture in the state of California. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
And thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you, and look forward to more conversations.
Likewise. All right, let it be known, family. It's time to wrap it up. But before we do, our Black history fact for today, which I think is tremendously important, on this day in 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It was a landmark piece of legislation that prohibited discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. This day is significant in Black history as it marked a major step towards ending segregation and promoting equality in the United States. And we find ourselves right back at this pivotal moment, or probably weeks and months before this, to where we have to continue to fight. But we know that when we fight, we win. And so today we remember the Big Six, the NAACP, the Pullman's Porter, the Urban League, SCLC, National Council Negro of Women. They are still fighting right now. They're telling us to call Congress. So these institutions are still relevant. They're still important, but most of all, it wouldn't have happened without us, the people. Us, the people. And so we have to continue to celebrate our wins, as we heard, and support community engagement, like things that Dr. Lola, Senator Lola is doing. And we just have to continue to fight. Of course, there we go. 202-224-3121. Make that call. And of course, the Black press is always so important to this movement. And so today, our Black-owned newspaper is the Florida Star. And we do need the Florida Star because we see what's happening in Florida right now. So the Florida Star was founded in 1951 by Eric O. Simpson to provide Jacksonville's African-American community with a dedicated newspaper during a time when their stories were largely ignored by mainstream media. It sounds like that's what's happening today. So the paper quickly became a powerful force for civil rights in the 1950s and 60s, advocating for government reforms, endorsing Black political candidates, and keeping the community informed about key social justice movements. Now, the Florida Star and its companion, the Georgia Star, remain the oldest African-American owned newspaper in the Northeast Florida, continuing a proud tradition of journalism, excellence, and community service. And so we need these narratives because we need to know what's really happening in Florida. And we know that we're going to get the watered down version in mainstream media. So if you want to know what's happening in Florida, you don't have to be a Floridian to know what's happening. So check out the Florida Star. And of course, there's so much happening in Black America, but you can stay at the pulse of what's happening at BlackPressUSA.com. Up-to-date information about what's happening with this BS bill, as Senator Lola Smallwood Cuevas called it. It's the big ugly bill. It's the BS bill. So if you want to find out what's happening, stay plugged with Black Press USA. And we'll be back tomorrow with more news. And don't forget, the State of the People is a marathon. And so they're having all the Black leaders, community organizers popping on, telling you what's at stake from a local to a state to a national level. We're streaming it live at Black Press USA. So you can pull up over there when we're done, and we'll pull it back up on you tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Thank you for joining us today.